It's a terrifying feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
That moment when your heart is absolutely screaming at me. It's fear or grief or just pure exhaustion.
Mhm.
And you look up for some kind of answer, some kind of sign, and the sky just feels
Like
close.
brass. That's
Oh,
the old metaphor, right? The heavens are like brass.
exactly. Thick, impenetrable. And the source material we're diving into today, it opens with that exact visceral image. It talks about those moments where, and I'm quoting here, the heart speaks louder than the voice.
And you're crying out, but you're getting nothing back. Just radio silence.
Yeah.
Uh,
In that experience, that is arguably one of the most destabilizing things for a person of faith.
Oh, for sure. We rely on communication. When the line goes dead, panic sets in. So today we're doing a deep dive into a text called Cuando Deus fica en silencio, which translates to when God is silent.
Okay.
And right off the bat, I think we need to be clear. This source isn't just, a list of times God didn't talk. It's analyzing silence as a mechanism. Right. Because the assumption, the knee-jerk reaction for all of us is that silence means absence. If I call you and you don't pick up, I assume you're not there.
Or that you're ignoring me.
Or you're mad at me, yeah.
Exactly. We project our own stuff onto it. But the whole mission of this source is to dismantle that idea. It argues that silence isn't a void. It's not an empty box. It's actually a very specific, very dense form of communication.
So the thesis is that silence is actually a language.
Precisely. A language with its own grammar, its own vocabulary. And like any language you don't speak, you're going to misinterpret the message. You'll hear, I hate you, when the message is actually wait, or grow up, or even look closer.
Okay, so let's learn the grammar. Because I think for most of us, when we hit that wall of silence, we don't think, oh, a complex dialect. We think disaster.
Right. Panic is the first dialect we all speak fluently. And the source gets that. It doesn't dismiss the pain. In fact, it points us immediately to Psalm 83 to show this is a universal struggle.
What does it say?
The writer says, do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace or be still. It sounds like someone banging on a locked door.
It really does. Desperation.
It is. But here's the nuance the source wants us to catch. This isn't an atheist shouting into the void. This is a believer, someone who is intimate with God.
Ah, so it's the confusion of intimacy, not the confusion of ignorance.
That's it, exactly. It's the person saying, hey, I know you can speak. I've heard you before, so why are you ghosting me now?
Ghosting is the perfect word for it. And it always seems to happen at the worst times, doesn't it?
Mm.
When the health fails or the future looks terrifying.
The valley, as the text calls it.
Yeah, and that leads to the first major reframe in this document. The author argues that this kind of silence, it isn't a glitch. It's not a bug in the system.
It's a feature.
Right. It's a standard structural part of the whole story.
Which is a bold claim. But if you look at the evidence the source lays out, it's pretty overwhelming. It takes us all the way back to Genesis 1 to prove it.
The very beginning.
Yep.
For the beginning even.
You were right. Before the famous let there be light, what was there? The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep.
Primordial silence.
Total heavy silence. But the source analyzes this as preparing the scenario. God wasn't absent. The text says he was hovering. He was setting the stage.
So the insight is that silence is often what comes right before a created act. You have to sit in the dark before you can get the light.
Yes, but okay, that's poetic. That makes sense on a cosmic scale. But then the source moves to a historical example that feels much, much heavier.
The intertestamental period.
The 400 silent years. Now we're talking about a real-world test of this theory.
And just to remind everyone listening, this is that gap between the Old and New Testaments.
Correct. Malachi ends, the prophet walks off stage, and then for 4 centuries, nothing. No prophets, no public revelation. Can you imagine that?
That is just a staggering amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Generations were born and died in that gap. It must have felt like total abandonment.
It had to. People were probably thinking, well, that's it. The story is over. We've been left behind. But looking back, what was that silence actually doing?
It was setting the stage for the Messiah.
He's the pressure cooker.
Yeah.
The source calls it an interval.
An interval, like an intermission at a play.
Exactly that. It's not the end of the show. It's the deep breath before the climax. So if you feel like you're in a period of silence, the text suggests you might just be in the interval before the main event.
I really like that. It makes the waiting feel active, not passive. Like the stage crew is working behind the curtain. But, and this is a big but, Not all silence is just waiting for a good surprise, right?
No. This is where the source gets into diagnostics. And some of these are, well, they're uncomfortable.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so the first category is what the source calls pedagogical silence.
The teaching silence. Sounds like the eat your vegetables of spiritual life.
It kind of is. And the case study here is the prophet Habakkuk.
Oh, I always feel for Habakkuk.
Yeah.
He's basically filing a formal complaint with management.
He is. He's the whistleblower. He's looking around at all the violence and injustice, and he's screaming, "How long, Lord, must I call for help? But you do not listen."
A completely fair question.
Yeah.
If you're powerful, why aren't you fixing this mess?
It's the problem of evil in a nutshell. But what's fascinating is God's response. When he finally does speak, he doesn't actually answer Habakkuk's specific question. He doesn't give him a policy breakdown.
He doesn't explain the why.
No. Instead, he reveals who he is. The silence was a mechanism to shift Habakkuk from needing an explanation to needing a relationship. The text points to, we walk by faith, not by sight.
And if we got an instant explanation for everything,
We'd walk by sight, or by logic, but not by faith. The source argues silence is the gym where faith gets built. It forces maturity. It's a classroom.
Okay, that's the constructive side. But then the source pivots to something much darker. The silence of approval.
Yeah, this is the one that makes you check your own conscience. This is the silence of disobedience.
And the example is King Saul. Such a tragic story. He started out so well.
He had everything going for him. But the narrative traces his downfall to one specific flaw: partial obedience.
Let's unpack that, because partial obedience sounds kind of soft. Like, I did most of it, doesn't that count?
And that's the trap. In our minds, 90% is an A-. But in this context, the source argues it's actually just rebellion. First, Saul offers a sacrifice he isn't supposed to because he's impatient.
Right.
Then he's told to destroy an enemy completely, but he saves the best livestock in the enemy king.
And his justification is so human.
Reason for not doing what I was told, but the prophet Samuel just cuts right through it. And the consequence, it's chilling. Later, Saul is in a huge crisis. The Philistines are attacking. He's terrified. He asks God for guidance. The text says the Lord answered him by no means. No dreams, no prophets, no priestly guidance, nothing. Total blackout.
That feels so harsh. He's in a life or death situation.
But the source puts it bluntly. God falls silent because he will not discuss what has already been clearly revealed and disobeyed. The insight is, I'm not giving you step 2 when you refuse to do step 1.
Wow. So the silence isn't God hiding, it's God waiting for you to go back.
It's a closed subject. It's God saying, we can't move forward until you deal with the last thing I told you. If you're in that kind of silence, you don't need a new word. You need to rewind the tape.
That's a huge insight. Stop asking for new guidance and check if you actually followed the old guidance.
Exactly. But, and this is so important, we can't stop there with Saul. If we do, God seems vindictive. The source immediately contrasts this with another type, the silence of grace.
This is the story of Peter. And it's a great comparison because on paper, Peter messed up just as badly as Saul. He denied even knowing Jesus.
3 times at Jesus' absolute lowest moment. It's a profound betrayal.
But the reaction is completely different. The source zooms in on this one moment. The rooster crows, Peter has just denied Jesus for the 3rd time, and then what happens?
The Lord turned and looked at Peter.
Just a look. He didn't say anything.
Not a single word. No, I told you so. No lecture. Just a look.
That silence must have been louder than a scream.
The source argues it broke Peter more than any lecture could have. He went out and wept bitterly. And here's the key. This wasn't the silence of rejection. It was the silence of restoration.
How do we know the difference?
The outcome. When Jesus is resurrected, the angel gives a specific instruction. Go tell the disciples and Peter. He's explicitly included. That silent look wasn't condemnation, it was grace.
So sometimes God is silent about our failures because speaking would only bring shame. The look is meant to restore, not destroy.
It's the difference between a judge's sentence and a parent's look at a heartbroken child. It's a silence that covers the fault while the heart heals.
Okay, so we have teaching, warning, and grace. But then we get to one that's really confusing. The source calls it the silence that precedes victory, or the depth test.
This is the Syrophoenician woman in Matthew 15.
I've got to be honest, this story always makes me uncomfortable. She comes to Jesus, her daughter is suffering, she's begging for help, and the text says, he answered her not a word.
He literally ignores her, and the disciples are annoyed. They're like, send her away, she's making a scene. It looks like total rejection.
Right. If I were her, I'd probably give up. Fine, forget it.
But look what she does. The source highlights her reaction. Because he's silent, she doesn't leave, she actually gets more intense.
She steps it up.
She does. She starts by calling from a distance. Then she comes closer. She kneels. She moves from a request to an act of worship. She prostrates herself.
The silence.
Yeah.
It was a draw. It was pulling her in deeper.
I think so. The source argues that if Jesus had just healed the daughter immediately, she would have gotten her miracle, sure. But she wouldn't have shown her faith. Because she persisted through the silence, Jesus ends up saying to her, great is your faith.
So the silence wasn't a no. It was a, how much do you really want this? Or how deep does your trust go?
Exactly. It's a test of depth. Sometimes when you're praying and getting nothing, God isn't ignoring you. He might be stretching your capacity to receive the answer.
That is a tough pill to swallow when you're in the middle of it.
It is, but it links directly to the next category, the silence of the test, the ultimate exam. And here we're talking about Abraham and Isaac.
Genesis 22, the most intense story. God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son, and Abraham obeys.
And he travels for 3 days walking toward this unthinkable act. And the whole time, what do you hear from heaven?
Nothing. Silence. Isaac is even asking, hey, Dad, where's the lamb for the sacrifice? And God says nothing.
Imagine the mental agony of that climb up the mountain. Every step is a chance for God to say, okay, stop, that's enough. But he waits. He waits until the altar is built. He waits until Isaac is bound. He waits until the knife is literally in the air.
Why? Why wait that long? It seems almost cruel.
Because the test wasn't about the sacrifice itself. It was about the total surrender. The source makes a profound point here. God often saves the revelation for the moment of greatest impossibility.
That reminds me of Job, too. 37 chapters of misery and silence.
And when God finally does show up, he doesn't give Job a list of reasons. He reveals his own majesty. The silence was the necessary stage for that revelation.
So there's a pattern here. The silence is always heaviest, thickest, most terrifying, right before the breakthrough.
Which brings us to the climax of the source material, the greatest silence.
The cross.
Matthew 27. Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?
The ultimate paradox. The one person who deserved an answer gets none.
The sky did not answer. There was no voice from heaven this time, just silence and darkness. But the source makes a critical theological point here. It says, while the physical world saw silence, the spiritual world was in hyperdrive.
What does it mean?
It means the silence wasn't inactivity. While the sky was quiet, the temple veil was tearing. Redemption was being paid for. The history of the world was hinging on that moment. God was never more active than he was in that silence.
So salvation was happening in the dark.
Yes. And then think about that Saturday, the day between the crucifixion and the resurrection. Absolute crushing silence. The disciples are hiding, thinking it's all over. But the source says, the silence of Saturday was the womb of Sunday.
That is a powerful line.
It was birthing the empty tomb. The silence wasn't defeat. It was the necessary condition for the greatest victory in history.
So if we pull all of this together from creation to the cross, there's a unified theory here.
There is. And the core message for anyone listening is this. God silent is not God standing still.
I just want to pause on that.
Yeah.
Because if you are in that valley right now, your feelings are telling you that silence means abandonment. It feels like the pilot has bailed out of the plane.
Right. But this material is shouting from the rooftops that silence is actually a sign of work. It's the sound of heavy lifting happening behind the curtain. It's the silence of a surgeon who's concentrating.
So how do we apply this? If someone's listening right now and they're in that silence, what's the first step?
First, you have to diagnose it. Ask the hard question. Is this the silence of reproval? Is there something I know I should have done that I haven't? If so, the answer is to go back and do it.
And if it's not that?
Then it's likely preparation. Reframe it. Instead of saying, God has abandoned me, try saying God is deepening me, or God is preparing a stage for something I'm not ready for yet.
It goes back to that intermission idea. The curtain is down, but that's because they're changing the set for the next act.
That's the perfect analogy. And the source promises that the silence will break. It always does, but the time of silence is never wasted time.
It's challenging us to stop fighting it and maybe lean into it.
To listen to the silence and let it do its work in you.
You know, we usually end with a takeaway, but there was one final provocative thought that really struck me from this source. It mentions that God often surprises us after the silence. The outcome is rarely what we expect, Job doesn't just get his health back, he gets double.
Mm-hmm. The Syrophoenician woman doesn't just get a healed daughter, she gets a commendation for her faith.
So here's the thought.
Mm.
What if the length of the silence corresponds to the magnitude of the surprise?
That's a fascinating way to frame it.
I mean, if you've been in the quiet for a really long time, longer than seems fair, longer than seems bearable, maybe it's not because you're forgotten. Maybe it's because the set change happening behind the curtain is just that massive.
The longer the silence, the bigger the reveal. I like that.
Something to hold on to next time the sky seems closed. Thanks for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you in the next one.